Ooh. Hello, everybody. Hello. Welcome back. It's been a little while, too long, if you'd ask me. The summer break, though, is finally over, and we are just one day away from seeing Formula One cars back on the Formula One tracks once again. And I really, really need Formula One to be back. Don't know about you, but it just hasn't quite been the same. It needs to happen very, very soon, and I cannot wait for free practice one tomorrow. We head to Zandvoort for round 14, the 13th race of the season. Of course, missing Imola partway through the first half of the season. And of course, let's delve into my predictions and preview this time around for the Netherlands Grand Prix. Max Verstappen there. I'm pretty sure we're going to be talking about him quite a bit. Let's delve into it, though, and talk about the specifics. History of Netherlands. It was added back to the calendar fairly recently. Like, it hasn't been that long since it was added back, but it is one of those tracks that was in Formula One for a very long time and made a resurgence a couple of years ago. Since it's been added back to the calendar, this character here, Max Verstappen, has absolutely dominated it, and the Dutch drivers just always seem to do really well here. In that, Max Verstappen is the only Dutch driver on the grid now. We have to just have a little moment for Nick de Vries, who almost managed to get a home Grand Prix in Formula One, something that lots of drivers can't say they have ever done. Similar to Zhou Guanyu, actually. I just feel really bad for him that the Chinese Grand Prix just never seems to happen. And like, same for Nick de Vries. I do feel for him, but he is off the grid, and instead we're going to be talking about this Dutch driver. Max Verstappen this weekend can make history and equal the record of Sebastian Vettel's 9 race victories in a row. Of course, the other Red Bull world champion. And it does seem like Max Verstappen is going through a very Vettel-like era. We think back to Vettel, he just didn't really have too much competition in that second, third, fourth championship. Well, actually, less so in the kind of fourth championship year with Fernando Alonso. But you think back and like 2010 was a pretty tough championship for Sebastian Vettel to win, very similar to Max Verstappen winning that first championship in 2021. And now he's going through that cycle of absolute dominance with Red Bull. Will it come to a close at Zandvoort? I don't think so. We know Max has been so good this year. You don't win 8 Grand Prix in a row, 10 out of the first 12 for no reason, and it being his home Grand Prix, it just seems like all the stars have aligned for Max Verstappen to equal this record held by Sebastian Vettel, go into another race in a week's time at Monza, and just take that record for his own. He is smashing record after record at the minute. Of course, last season, he destroyed so many records, points per season, wins per season, and it feels like he's going to do that all over again. So we are just going to see history this weekend at the Zandvoort track. Let's delve into the track itself. The Dutch Grand Prix will see 72 laps of the 4.259 kilometer track. It is a tricky track, actually. It's one of the shorter tracks on the calendar, but lots and lots of very difficult medium speed, low speed corners. 14 corners in total, 2 DRS zones between turn 10 and turn 11 is the first DRS zone. And that DRS zone, you're not going to see many overtaking opportunities down in towards turn 11. It's more to give people a little bit of an advantage coming around 12, 13, and to give them that little bit of a boost so that they can use that second DRS zone between sort of turns 13, really, all the way around the banked turn 14 down towards turn 1. So you can use DRS all the way down there to try and launch yourself at someone down towards turn 1. The circuit is very narrow, though, very twisty, very high downforce, and it's one of the only tracks with banked corners. So the overtaking opportunities are going to be minimal, and maybe sort of down towards turn 1 is going to be your only real opportunity, hence that second DRS zone there to try and launch you around those corners, get you involved in towards turn 1, and make those overtaking opportunities happen. As I said, very twisty, very narrow, and very difficult to overtake. You look at sort of the hard braking zones, there aren't many of them. Turn 8 is another opportunity for you to maybe sneak up the inside of somebody. Turn 11, as I said before, is an opportunity, is a hard braking zone, but realistically, it's sort of using that DRS down towards turn 11 to just catch up enough to go towards turn 1. And then the rest of the corners, they're all very medium speed. Obviously, there is braking zones towards them, but you did carry a lot of speed around here, and that's why the tyres this weekend are going to be heavily degraded. It is going to be another one of those weekends where we see tyres falling apart and carcasses left, right, and center. We are using the hardest tyre compound, the C3, C2, and C1, the hardest compounds of tyre that Pirelli offer. Not great news for Ferrari. You might remember just every time we've used the C1 this year, they just really haven't got on with that hardest compound of tyre, Ferrari. So if you're a Ferrari fan, you kind of want to be steering away from that hard compound tyre, but the tyre degradation on the Ferrari isn't great either, and this track is quite old. The circuit is full of those medium speed banked corners, as I said, so there will be a lot of tyre degradation, and therefore tyres are the only real overtaking opportunity, in my opinion. As I said, down towards turn 1, if you can get that boost from the DRS. But we've seen this year that DRS hasn't been a massive benefit to a lot of the cars unless you're a Red Bull. So unfortunately, I think we're going to be looking at tyre degradation and strategy and tyre choice as the real chance to overtake this year. Undercuts and overcuts will be used to try and make up those positions, because last year we saw a lot of 3-stop strategies. There was a safety car at the end of the Grand Prix though, so that added an extra pit stop to a lot of those drivers. We're going to see maybe 2-stop as the optimal strategy. I'm thinking probably medium hard for a lot of those teams. But again, you're using that hard compound tire that lots of teams don't really get on with. Ferrari in particular. I'm looking at Haas as well. Haas have really struggled to get the C1 to work. Maybe it is those Ferrari powered cars. Unless, of course, there is rain, which could switch up the strategies a little bit. Friday, looking like it's going to be a little bit warmer and a lot less chance of rain in free practice. So at least the cars will be set up fully for the weekend during FP1 and FP2. However, on the Saturday is where it gets a little bit interesting. A 70% chance of rain on the Saturday during qualifying, which could mix up the grid massively. And as we've just spoken about, the overtaking opportunities are at a minimal around here. It's a lot about the tyre strategies, and therefore qualifying, mixing up the grid in that way, really could be difficult to overtake, and therefore we could see some surprises on the Saturday, which lead to some really good results on the Sunday, because on the Sunday there's a lot less chance of rain, especially during the Grand Prix in particular, around a 30% chance of rain, so unlikely that the rain will come on the Sunday, but really could mix up the Saturday, similar to what we saw in Canada, where the grid was mixed up quite a bit. But Canada, you have a little bit more of an overtaking opportunity there, less so here, and defensive driving is really going to be key on the Sunday for a lot of those cars if they can take advantage of the weather during the Saturday. Obviously, we delve into the Constructors Championship. We can look at what's happening and who we should be looking out for. Red Bull just completely on a different planet at the moment, and we don't really need to talk about them or think about them much this weekend. Instead, I really want to focus on the fact that Mercedes have still got that gap and should be fairly decent on track this weekend, and therefore might be able to actually elongate that championship lead over Aston Martin and Ferrari as those two squabble with one another, because I think Ferrari are definitely ahead right now in terms of where their car is, at least if we look at Spa in the last few races before the summer break. Aston Martin seem to have fallen off a little bit, and Ferrari seem a lot quicker, but this track doesn't suit the Ferrari car whatsoever. So I think this battle between Aston Martin and Ferrari is the real one to look out for this weekend. I think Mercedes are kind of going to be out there on their own, not quite as good as the Red Bulls, but the Aston Martins and Ferraris could be on very similar pace to one another. And then, of course, we have McLaren on 103 points now. Can they join that? Obviously, they're still 90 odd points off the Ferraris and Aston Martins of this world, but if we look at the last 3 races before we came into the summer break, they made up a huge amount of ground on Aston Martin and Ferrari, and we've still got 10 races left to go. So it's certainly not out of the question that Ferrari and Aston Martin could be caught by McLaren, but it would take a lot of very good weekends from the McLaren car. Alpine are a little bit in no man's land right now, 57 points. I can't see any of the bottom 4 getting anywhere close to 57 points, but I also can't see Alpine catching any of the top 5. So they're kind of taking part in this second half of the season and probably will just be there for a lot of the races. Don't get me wrong, they'll probably pick up points. They'll probably be in and around the kind of 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th places. I can't see any of the Alpines breaking into that top 5 again. I know that Esteban Ocon picked up a podium, but it's just not quite there for me right now. And then we've got the bottom 4 brawl: Williams, Haas, Alfa Romeo, AlphaTauri. I think this track in particular doesn't suit the Haas and Alfa Romeo car, the Ferrari-powered cars, especially with Haas having really poor tyre degradation. So this is an opportunity now for Williams, and more specifically AlphaTauri, who need to close that gap. 2 points so far this season thanks to Yuki Tsunoda. If we then move over to the Drivers' Championship, obviously, Perez needs to qualify well. He is still 40 points ahead of Fernando Alonso. And after that blip towards the middle of the sort of first half of the season, Sergio Perez certainly needs to show something. Unfortunately, this is all about qualifying, and it's all about qualifying in mixed conditions. So I'm a little bit worried about Sergio Perez, although we'll delve into that in a little bit more detail in a second. Alonso versus Hamilton is one I'm very interested in. Although I think the Mercedes car will be quicker this weekend, it is Fernando Alonso, and with the mixed weather conditions on the Saturday, maybe he can pull something out of the bag. He's still 1 point ahead of Lewis Hamilton. I feel like Lewis Hamilton will probably step ahead of Fernando Alonso in the championship this weekend if everything goes to plan for both Mercedes and Aston Martin. But you never know with these kind of tracks, and especially, as I said, with the possibility of rain on the Saturday. Leclerc, Russell, Sainz is another battle right towards the top end of the grid. Like, literally, if Max Verstappen didn't exist, this top end of the grid would be so competitive right now. Leclerc, Russell, Sainz, all on very, very close points to one another. Leclerc and Russell actually on the same points as one another. And with Ferrari struggling this weekend, again, I think this is an opportunity for George Russell to jump up in the standings a little bit. But then if George Russell has a George Russell kind of weekend, like he's not been the best in terms of consistency before the summer break, and he needs to make that happen in the second half of the season. Lando Norris now finds himself in a little bit of a no man's land in 8th place there. He's not going to be able to catch Carlos Sainz straight off the bat, maybe in 3-4 races time. Lance Stroll as well, sitting kind of in the middle of nothing, because I can't see Esteban Ocon jumping up 12 points unless he picks up another wonder podium out of nowhere. The Ocon-Piastri battle is the one I'm interested in, though. I think this is Piastri's chance to finally overtake both Alpines, and what a story that will be after obviously everything that happened last year. If Piastri can jump in front of both Ocon and Gasly in the standings, I think that would be very, very satisfying for him, and unfortunately, very difficult pill for the Alpine team to swallow, although Alpine are all over the place, so who knows what's going to happen between there. Albon is leading that kind of bottom 4 team pack at the moment with 11 points on the board, whereas Logan Sargeant has 0. So that's one to watch out for, I think, this weekend, because Williams, I think, will have a better car than a lot of those teams down the bottom there. And therefore, I feel like this is an opportunity for Logan Sargeant to finally pick up those first points in Formula 1 after 13 Grand Prix. And Nick De Vries holds on to 20th place for now. Daniel Ricciardo needs an 11th place to replace Nick De Vries, because Nick De Vries did manage a 12th place finish in his very short Formula 1 career. So we're all looking at Daniel Ricciardo, whether or not he can get kind of the Yuki Tsunoda spot of 11th place and possibly get himself onto the top 20. Yuki Tsunoda as well will be looking at trying to jump in front of Bottas and Zhou, while the AlphaTauri car suits this track just a little bit more than those Ferrari-powered teams. In my opinion, though, in terms of the predictions, winners and losers, the main winners from this weekend will be Max Verstappen and the McLaren duo. It's his home circuit. A record is on the line. Max Verstappen's been at his absolute best recently, can undoubtedly go on and do something special this weekend. And then McLaren performed really well before the summer break, in particular Budapest, which is a very similar track in terms of its layout, and therefore I think after Spa and the fact that they got the setup wrong, they'll be looking to bounce back. They'll be looking to show that they are still in and amongst those top 3 teams. Because if you look at the overall pace of the teams themselves over the weekend, McLaren have just jumped up so quickly and they're really, really competitive right at the top. And I think they want to show that once again. Then in terms of the losers, because it's all about qualifying, I know that Sergio Perez did okay in Spa and he did all right, but after those 5 qualifying sessions where he didn't make it through into Q3, I still have question marks over Sergio Perez. And I think this could be another one of those weekends where it is the Max Verstappen show and Sergio Perez doesn't quite turn up, especially in those changeable conditions on Saturday. And Ferrari, of course, I touched upon the fact that I don't think Ferrari will have a good weekend because of the C1 tyre, because of the tyre degradation, and because they just don't really have pace in these tracks that are lower speed, medium speed, high downforce. Like we saw them do really well in Spa, but that's a much more sort of high speed circuit. And I think the Aston Martins will maybe have the advantage over the Ferraris this weekend. I think it will almost be the Red Bulls, then the McLarens and the Mercedes, and then just underneath that, the Aston Martins and the Ferraris. That kind of top 5 battle in that order. And therefore, I've gone for a podium of Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, and Lewis Hamilton. The 3 of them, British bias in there. Nearly chucked Oscar Piastri in there. I just think Oscar Piastri right now still has those incidents in him and still shows just a little bit of naivety sometimes, which he's absolutely allowed to do. He's a rookie and he's having an exceptional season. If you think to Spa and, he came together with Carlos Sainz, and then even before that in Budapest, he couldn't quite hold on to his tyres long enough compared to Lando Norris, compared to Lewis Hamilton. I think he's just not quite there yet. He still needs polishing a tiny little bit. But Max Verstappen, almost guaranteed of taking victory this weekend. The script just writes itself unless something catastrophically wrong goes for Red Bull. McLaren suit this track, I think. Higher downforce track, medium speed corners, a little bit more like Budapest. Silverstone as well as a similar track, and Norris was just absolutely flying on both of those circuits just before the summer break. From Austria onwards, I would say that Lando Norris has been probably top 3 drivers for me on the grid. He's been absolutely sensational, and then Lewis Hamilton has been in great form every single time that he's been on track this year. Like, I think he'll just continue to get the most out of that Mercedes package. I don't think any weekend in particular, Mercedes are the fastest or even second fastest car. But I think the fact that they're in second place in the constructor standings just shows you how well Lewis Hamilton has got the most out of that car every single time that he can, and just delivers weekend after weekend, even when the car itself isn't that great. But I'm so glad to be back for the Netherlands Grand Prix. That's my preview and predictions for you. I'd love to know what you think. Get your predictions down in the comments below as well. Let me know what you think it is going to be like this weekend. If there is rain on the Saturday, do you think that lends itself to one driver over another or one team over another? We, of course, saw McLaren set up for the rain in Spa. Will they set up for the rain again? I really hope not, because it didn't go well that time. And yeah, I massively appreciate being back. Absolutely love to see it. If you didn't see me on the last lap, that's the reason I wasn't here for the final 2 races before the summer break on this channel. But we're back once again. Check out the last lap, check out here, subscribe, all of that good stuff. And then this weekend, I'm going to be live for qualifying, live for the race as well, and live after the race for a little bit of a race recap and a little bit of a discussion with you guys. But this is a brand new segment. I'd love to know your thoughts on this, actually. Do you want to see more of these style of videos where it's a little bit quicker, a little bit live, and therefore just my thoughts and feelings on the track, the weather, the teams, and what we're looking forward to this weekend? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. It is indeed a new track for Piastri as well. So yeah, that might go against him too, because obviously, no, they don't race it here in Formula 2 either, do they? Ooh, that'd be interesting. But anyway, subscribe for all of that, and I will see you all very